Yes, sir.
Good. Great. So let us start now. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's class is a brief one in which we will talk about a topic that sometimes does get asked in your examinations, particularly for your future examinations, particularly your MCQ examinations. They constitute an important topic. And the main purpose of today's class is to give you a brief idea about a new disease that you do sometimes encounter, but the way to manage sometimes does become a very difficult option. Okay, so uh, now what we'll do is that we'll start today with discussing about something called as fecal incontinence. Now, whenever we talk about something called fecal incontinence, as you know, the word incontinence means that the inability to hold something. That means, say, urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence definitely means that it is an inability to hold the feces, and thus in this case, it will be flatus also. So, when I use the word incontinence, now the minute I use the word incontinence, remember that. So, the main thing of importance is it is an inability to hold the it is an inability to hold feces and flatus. Now, this definition, okay, is more or the less a standard definition that people will usually use, and some people do not use the word inability to hold. They say that is an inability to maintain the voluntary control of the passage of gas, liquid, or solid. So you can use any of them. Okay, so please remember that. So that this is technically this part. That means that now to understand this very simplistically, whatever we understand is that if you think over with the rectum and the anal canal, the rectum and the anal canal has the levator ani, which is a voluntary or a striated muscle. Okay, and thus this forms the external sphincter complex, whereas another muscle complex, another parallel movement that takes place is the internal sphincter, as you can see in the picture, is this one, which is made from the contribution, which is thus made from the contribution of the circular muscles of the rectum. Okay, so you have the circular muscles of the rectum which make up into the internal sphincter. Now, the basic idea, ladies and gentlemen, is that the both external and internal combine. It is like holding. Okay, so that like, so it is like holding in your hand water, liquid, that is water is a liquid, okay, and some marbles which are solid. Now, how long you can hold is a very difficult thing to ask, but if you ask the anal canal does a very good job, in which that it does not fail in any of its queries or quests. It does a very faithful job and does it and holds it. Now, so whenever we talk about an incontinence, the first question that obviously will come that, sir, why should we be reading about incontinence? Now, the only thing that is important is that incontinence, for all technical purposes, remember that is not a fatal disease, but for the patient, there is a massive amount of social discomfort that this patient is going to face, and the quality of life for this patient is going to be hampered. So the only point of contention knowing is that the quality of life is down. As you can see, the quality of the life of the patient is very poor. Now, so if you know about this first part, the second part is what are the causes of fecal incontinence? What are the causes of a fecal incontinence? That means Why cannot the patient hold up the stools? Very straightforward. Now, there are various approaches to think of this. I found a good approach to know about is now what I found was a good approach to know about. It is that we divide the causes into three groups. One, the pelvic floor is found to be normal. That means the levator ani, except the supports, etc., are found to be normal. The pelvic floor is found to be abnormal or diseased. And finally, the pelvic floor, that means this will be technically some disease of the muscles. Pelvic innervation, that means the nerves that supply the pelvic floor. That means this is more or less a neurological pathology or neurological problem. So causes of fecal incontinence could be grossly divided into three groups. The pelvic floor being normal, the pelvic floor being abnormal, which is a muscle problem, and the pelvic innervation is with this neurological issues. That means the nerves which are going to supply the pelvic floor. Okay, so this is the first part of the story. Now, the next thing of knowing is that what if the pelvic floor is normal? Why should the patient have this problem? The first point of knowing is that either, if you think over from this area, either the content that are coming through from the distal part of the rectum, that means if the contents that are coming in through the distal part of the rectum are increased in volume. Now, why should they be increased in volume? Now, that can have multiple reasons. It can be an infectious cause, very common in tropical countries. It could be patients with inflammatory bowel disease. And now, it could be patients who have a lot of laxatives, okay, and something called as a laxative abuse syndrome. Okay. Now, so these are patients whom the amount of the liquid that comes to the rectum is high. Sometimes there could be some villous adenomas which are responsible for secreting lots of mucin. That means the mucin secretion is increased. Okay, so the first part is this. The second part of the pathology, so if you remember the first part, so the first part is that something that is coming to the rectum is huge in amount. The second part of the story is that what if there is something that is there in the rectum and this rectal pathology is responsible for so much amount of high output that in the rectum it can have either fecal impaction. Now that means the patient did not pass stools well, and the impacted feces now can continuously go on coming down, and then the patient may feel that okay, so I'm having an incontinence. Or it could be a rectal malignancy, which is sorry, it could be a rectal malignancy. Just a second, please. Yeah, so rectal malignancy, a cancer in the rectum, particularly mid rectum, that can produce a lot of mucin and can produce this. Okay. Now, in this category, people add something in which they feel that it is more or the less the nerves. Now, please appreciate that I have had the nerves that are supplying the rectum only. We are not talking of the pelvic floor, because if I will be talking of the pelvic floor, I will change the color of the nerves and I will make them blue. Please see that. That means basically the main point of understanding is that these nerves that I'm trying to shade or make in front of you is something called as autonomic nerves, which are diseased. So if you think about autonomic nerves and their diseases, now there could have been multiple problems, example being a stroke or a CVA, which is a very common one. It could be spinal cord pathology, if that is a big chapter. It could be conditions like meningomyelocele. In pediatrics, you know what is meningomyelocele. Okay, that means the part of the spinal column and the nerves are out. Rarely, multiple sclerosis can also be an important neurological cause, and all of them have to do with autonomic. So please remember that. So in the rectum, either things are coming in high volume, or it is a local pathology of the rectum, or it is a pathology of the nerves, that is autonomic. Please appreciate these things. Please appreciate these things. Right. Now, when you talk about, let us now talk about something of the pathologies in this area. That means the pelvic floor. We are not talking of the nerves, we are talking of the pelvic floor. That means let us concentrate on something called the abnormal pelvic floor. What are the causes of in the abnormal pelvic floor? Again, simple words. When you talk about abnormal pelvic floor, the abnormal pelvic floor pathologies could have been, or technically enough, as I've said, this is everything to do with the muscle. That means when you talk about these muscle problems, the only thing that I can comment upon is that the best example is an trauma to the muscle. Now, the trauma could have been an iatrogenic trauma. Say, for example, you are doing an operation for a fissure in ano or a fistula. So, fistula, fissure in ano, and you land up injuring the external sphincter and the internal sphincter. Plus, you are so talented, you also injure the puborectalis. You say, wow, man, he's really talented. That's it. So this chap is going to have a incontinence. Whereas if it is an accidental trauma, simple things, in which kind of accidents will you have an injury to the muscle, injuries of the pelvis or pelvis fracture? Okay. So these can be responsible for this. Now, rarely in this setting, now this has decreased a lot, is obstetric injuries, which happen usually due to a prolonged labor. Okay, now when you particularly think about a prolonged labor with the head being in the perineum, there is a stretching of the pudendal nerve. And the pudendal nerve is responsible for innervation of the muscles, and that produces a host of problems. Okay, so this completes. The next and the last of this is, if you have completed these two, the last of these problems is something of pelvic innervation or neurological problems of the pelvic innervation. Now, so is the screen visible to everyone? Ladies and gentlemen, is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, so when you talk about the pelvic innervation, by this time now, I am not talking of the spinal nerves. Now I am talking, or technically enough, I am not talking of autonomic control, I am talking of somatic nerves. Now, when you talk about the somatic nerves and their loss of control, now the best example, now this is not a very, very strong understood area. There used to be a condition called as the descending perineum syndrome. Now, this descending perineum syndrome technically means that the perineum is gradually getting. That means if this is the levator ani, remember that levator ani is being pierced by this tube. So when you think over with the levator ani in the perineum being pierced by this tube, now this group of disease technically suggests that there is a host of problems around this area, and this host of problems around this area will suggest that the perineum along with the muscles will descend. And if you're thinking that yes, if this descent thing makes you think over for a rectal prolapse, yes, a part of the spectrum of rectal prolapse, or if you're thinking about an uterine prolapse, then a rectocele of concern, okay, or a cystocele are all going to be clubbed in this category. So please remember this. So rectal prolapse, rectoceles and cystoceles are going to be clubbed in this category. Now, so if this is the full spectrum of this, something called as descending perineum syndrome. Let us have a quick recap. Why does a patient have incontinence? Pelvic floor being normal, the etiologies could have been anything that is coming up in the rectum from the proximal part of the colon. Now that could have been due to multiple causes. Second one are local pathologies in the rectum like a malignancy or fecal impaction. The third are autonomic nerves that supply the rectum, that includes pathologies in the spinal cord or the central nervous system like a stroke. Now, talking about pelvic floor with muscle pathologies is purely a trauma. That means it can be an iatrogenic, it can be obstetric, it can be accidental trauma. Okay, so 3 points. So this completes the first part of the story. Now, the second part of the story is how will you assess such a patient or assessment of a patient of a fecal incontinence. As I've said, this is not a big chapter. So, assessment of a patient of a fecal incontinence. Now, whenever you talk about assessment of a patient, now probably like other branches of medicine, the physical examination of the patient does have many things to tell you or predict. That means whenever you go for, so the first point is taking a history, and that taking a history, the most important point to understand is to quantify from the patient something called as a stool diary. Please remember this new terminology that I am making you understand or know. So something called as a stool diary. Now what is this stool diary business? Now some people called it as a bowel diary. Now, this bowel diary story doesn't mean that for the next 14 days or the 14 days before or after, what you tell the patient is that number one is that you tell the patient how many times he went to the stools. Okay. And number two is that what was the urgency to pass the stool. Now it is like urine thing. Now, what is the quantity that came out? Now, after we have talked about the quantity, the next important point is what is the quality? Now, how do you measure the quality of the stool? So, in one of the classes, I was telling you something called as stool is quantified according to the consistency. Now, consistency means this is something new that needs to be understood, is a scale called as the Bristol stool chart. Now, so what is interesting in this Bristol stool chart is that the type 1 of a Bristol stool chart means that the patient has separate hard lump. You can see that. So these are all stools and these are all, they look like small rocks. Okay. So the patient really has a tough time to pass. A type 2, remember, looks like a sausage. Now, do you see that? Oh my God, he's talking like dinner. So it is a sausage shaped, but it is lumpy. A type 3, okay, is again a sausage shaped, but it has a cracks on the surface. So it has a cracks on the surface. A type 4, remember, looks like a sausage. I will prefer looks like maybe a snake. Okay, is smooth and is soft. A type 5 is a soft blob. A type 5, remember, is a soft blob. Okay, and this soft blob has clear edges. You are wondering, oh my God, he's talking. So next time you ask anyone with a stool, so they're going to ask you, oh my God, doctor, you know so much. Now, the next thing is, now this, rather than having a type 5, it now looks like a fluffy piece or a mushy stool. Fluffy piece or a mushy stool. Whereas a type 6, if it is type 7, is technically looks like water or watery. So the only reason about knowing this from your patient is that now What is normal? Now see guys, normal is a very difficult thing to define in this one, but probably a type 3, type 4 is considered to be somewhat normal. Now your basic idea for a medical management is that you need to go up like this. Okay, you see, in gastroenterology the treatment logic is very easy. You need to make the liquid stools somewhat like this, but if the patient is suffering from a constipation, then the stool has to be made like this. So this is all that you need to understand. So that means if you ask the patient on something called bowel diary or this one, so please ask the patient time, urgency, quantity, quality of this. Now there are many scores that are used in this aspect, and there are many ways to assess that. Example, a very famous score is something called as a Wexner score. So we'll not talk about scores today evening, so don't get afraid. But this is what you are required to know. There are other scores to measure the quality of life. There are particularly some specified, validated, called as fecal incontinence specific scores, which measure the quality of life. So if you are thinking about what is there to assess in history, ladies and gentlemen, this is this. Particularly remember, think about from the diary. Now, after you have taken the history, now comes the examination, and this one, the focused examination, believe me, is probably the most important thing. Rather than depending upon an MRI or an endorectal ultrasound, an examination starts with examination of the perianal area, okay, which can tell you about the presence of liquid feces, perianal excoriations, etc. The second point of this one, after this is, the second point of this one is, now what is the shape of the anus? Please remember that. What is the shape of the anus? Now that means if the patient on the normal anus should look like a circle because the muscles are like this. Now if you have done a sphincterotomy, then, and the sphincterotomy has been a real splitting sphincterotomy, as you can see, when it heals, now this area, when this thing is going to heal, what happens is that there happens to be some amount of fibrous tissue in this region. And if this looks like a fibrous tissue in this region, this material is thus called as a keyhole deformity. So which is very classical. Particularly remember that if you talk over with a keyhole deformity, now a keyhole deformity is usually seen in a posterior midline. That means rather than having a picture like this, the keyhole deformity is particularly very important if you have it in the posterior midline, because this is usually a point that suggests that maybe the patient had a fissure, and through the fissure someone did a fissurectomy. Now what is important is, so this is the first point about to see, that means to look or to see. Now if you want to feel, that means whenever you are putting your finger in the rectum or a digital rectal evaluation, the first thing to assess is the resting tone. Remember that the resting tone, about 80% of the resting tone, or 85%, is done by the internal sphincter. So this suggests a big important part by the resting tone. Then thereafter, you are required to now ask the patient to go for something called as the strength of squeeze. Tell the patient, okay, so now grip my finger. Now, if the patient is trying to grip the finger, remember that that is somewhat of a job of both external and internal. So, that means the gripping of the finger is a job of internal as well as the external sphincter. Now, what is important in this one is that after the gripping or the strength of squeeze, see the holding time. Now, a normal adult is going to hold it for a maximum of 3 minutes. Usually, an early fatigability, that means an early fatigue in that. Okay, So please remember that an early fatigability may suggest that there is a denervation pathology. Okay, but you cannot be too clear about it in that. The last one is that the DRE should feel for any nodule or any growth. The DRE feels for a nodule and the growth. Okay, right. Now, so these are the two things to be done. After you have done these things, at this point of time, ladies and gentlemen, this is the point that you need to take a decision. That means it is at this point that I will always like to make an algorithm and thereafter think what I can do for the patient rather than subject the patient to big tests. Okay, remember that definitely all patients should have after a DRE to be accompanied by a proctoscopy and preferably at least a sigmoidoscopy if not a colonoscopy. The reason about doing a sigmoidoscopy, colonoscopy is that you rule out common pathologies like malignancy and inflammatory bowel disease. But the question is not that, but the question is that now what are you going to do? Now see, after you have done that, your algorithm at this point divides into 2 points. The cause of the incontinence has been identified. Now, what do you mean by identified? Identified means, say, for example, the patient had a malignancy or patient had an IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, and you treat this like that. Okay. Or if you have not identified, if you have not identified, then at this group, you initiate something called as a medical therapy. Now, what are the medical therapies? We'll talk about that very quickly. Okay. Now, medical therapies, ladies and gentlemen, to start with, there are two components in the medical therapy. If you think over, there are two great. Number one is pharmacology or drugs that are used. That includes, as you can see, bulk forming drugs like isabgula, etc. Or it could have been anti-motility drugs like loperamide. As I've told you, the basic idea is to make the stool more hard and firm, okay, so that the patient can pass into that. So you can have loperamide and you can have bulk forming stool. So please remember that. Now people have also added something called as diphenolate with atropine. So people have tried adding diphenolate with atropine. Okay. Now the basic idea about a medical therapy is to decrease the transit, to make the transit slow. That's it. And to increase the stool consistency. To increase the stool consistency. That's it. So this is the basic point that you need to know. Now, after you have done the medical therapy, the next point of concern is that see what happens to the patient with a medical therapy. Because remember that, because medical therapy is all that is important. Now, after the medical therapy, there is a group that will improve. And this group which improves, believe me, they are really going to be so happy with you that they are going to be lifelong your patients. There is another group which does not improve. And this group, believe me, is again not going to leave you either. Does not improve. Now, if it is does not improve, the next problem is now send the patient to a specialty anorectal clinic with particular stress on and anorectal assessment lab. Okay, so this is a very specialty. Definitely not all hospitals will have this. Few hospitals in few centers are going to have this. Please remember that. So in this anorectal clinic and this anorectal lab, they are going to perform at least two investigations. The third one will be done if it is required. The first one assesses the anatomy of the sphincter, something called as an endorectal ultrasound. For the first one assesses the sphincter called as an endorectal ultrasound, which assesses the integrity of the external and integrity of the internal sphincter. Now, say for example, the patient had a injury to the external sphincter, so it looks somewhat like this. So it is as simple as that to remember, but remember this is a very operator dependent procedure, and for the patient, well, not that comfortable. Now, some people have used an MRI of the pelvic floor, and the MRI of the pelvic floor is an important thing to remember. Now, MRI of the pelvic floor is important to remember. The next part of this is, if you want the physiology, that means that what is the manometry, then the important point of manometry is done by something called as a anorectal manometry, and something called as electromyography. So you are required to do something called as an anorectal manometry along with an electromyography, along with an anorectal manometry, along with a electromyography. So please remember that one. Okay. Now, whenever you talk about this anorectal manometry, now what are the things that it does assess? Because you can rarely have this kind of reports also. Now, they are going to tell you something called as a typical resting pressure. The resting pressure, as I have said, is made by mostly the internal sphincter muscle, and the typical resting pressure in an adult is about 40 to 60 millimeters of mercury. Please remember the value comes in your future examinations. Okay, so if you injure the sphincter during a sphincterotomy, this is something that decreases. Now, when you talk about something called as a squeeze pressure, something that I told you, now, squeeze pressure, remember that is definitely a very difficult one to quantify, but the squeeze pressure is quantified according to the length. The squeeze pressure is quantified according to the length of the high pressure zone, somewhat like the lower esophageal sphincter. Okay. Usually the high pressure zone should measure like the lower esophageal sphincter about 2 to 3 centimeter. Okay, right. Now, apart from the squeeze pressure, people use something now called as the rectal sensation or the rectal capacitance, which technically means that if you insert a balloon in the rectum and then gradually start distending it with a normal saline, at what volume delta V does the rectum have a sensation? So please remember that. Now, rectal capacitance means that what is the volume that you need in the rectum to produce a distension, and tell the patient that yes, I am feeling like going to the stools. Now, what is important is that in this rectal capacitance, okay, in this rectal capacitance, the main problem is there can be two things that can happen. One, they can have early responders. That means that these people, whatever you give, say for example 10 to 20 ml only, they feel that okay doc, I am feeling something, let me go to the stools. Can happen due to either proctitis, particularly in inflammatory bowel disease, can happen due to post radiation changes or a post operative changes in that. Remember that a LAR after a, or a post LAR with a small pouch can also sometimes lead to this. Okay. Now, the other side is delayed response. That means that whatever you give, the patient says that okay doc, I'm not feeling going to the stools. This can be done technically. Remember that patients who have neurological problems, so patients who have a neurological problems, that means in the spinal cord, or patients who have a chronic constipation. So any of these can land up into this rectal capacitance issues. Okay. The last one that you are required to know in your MCQs as well is something called rectoanal inhibitory reflex, also commonly called as a sampling reflex. Now, what does it mean? It means, guys, very simple. If the rectum feels that there is something that is coming or liquid is coming from this area. Now remember that the rectum understands that maybe that this gentleman is not in a good state to go to the toilet. So what he does is that in coordination with the central nervous system, when liquids come to this region, the only thing that he does is that the internal sphincter. So please remember that means it can be liquid, it can be gas. Now what it does is that it allows the internal sphincter to relax. Now, why relax? Because relaxation brings it to the anal mucosa, now which is very sensitive mucosa. Okay, and so that means what it does is that it is sampling the rectal content to go to the anal canal. Okay, and then remember that if it is like that, the external sphincter parallelly is undergoing a contraction. Now, the external sphincter means the puborectalis is undergoing a contraction. That means the rectoanal inhibitory reflex is basically a normal physiological mechanism in which the body understands that I cannot allow the liquid or gas to flow. So that is something called as rectoanal inhibitory reflex. Now, this is usually lost in conditions like a Hirschsprung's disease. Sorry, conditions like an Hirschsprung's disease, rare conditions like a Chagas disease, but for more importantly, okay, is that particularly if you have done a coloanal anastomosis, a coloanal anastomosis becomes an important point, and if you have done a coloplasty even, loss of the rare is a very difficult area to understand and treat. So this is what you are required to do in the lab. Now, after you have done in the lab, remember that after you have evaluated your patient in the lab by all these things, then after you have done with all these things that you have done, the next thing to identify in the patient is now go for two questions. Does the patient have a history of a prolapse? It can be a uterine prolapse, rectal prolapse, etc. Then please consider surgery for the prolapse. That's it. Now, if the patient has no prolapse or after surgery, there is a recurrence of the incontinence. That means again, without surgery, patient was incontinent. Now with a rectal prolapse surgery, patient again has an incontinence. Now what is important in this one is that now this group, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, is a very difficult group for anyone to find and treat. Now what we can do is that at this point of time, you now need to take a decision that what you are going to do. Now, this is a very difficult area and this is a very difficult terrain to understand. Now, as I have said, at this point, you ask yourself two very important problems. Number one is that, is the sphincter in defect? Now, how do you understand by sphincter defect? As I've told you, by doing an endoscopic ultrasound. By doing an endoscopic ultrasound. Now, the sphincter defects could be none, okay, or the sphincter defect, remember, could be none, or the sphincter defects could be on two sides. Just understand this point of the story. The first one, because I'm coming to the end of the talk. Now, if the sphincter defect, remember that, say for example, this is the sphincter, okay, internal, external, whatever you call it as, and now see how much is the problem. You see, oh my God, this is how much of the sphincter that is lost. Let me ask you guys, you are sleeping off. Okay, how much of the sphincter is lost?
More than
Hello.
50%.
More than 180 degree, 50%. If there is more than 180 degree, 50%, this patient, number one to begin with, is a poor prognosis. Now, there can be multiple options. Now, a disease that has multiple options means we do not know what to do. It can be something called as a muscle transposition, particularly taking the gracilis, and we really had one such patient to do that. Okay, we took the gracilis and made a new sphincter, believe me, and it did not work that well. This is an honest confession. You can use something called as an artificial sphincter. Now, artificial sphincter nowadays, initially there used to be some implantable sphincters, but these implantable sphincters are not at all used now because they have been shown to have lots of complication into that. So what people have started using in that one is that rather than use this artificial sphincter, people have used something called as a new device called as Phoenix, F-E-N-I-X. Now, what is this thing called as Phoenix? Phoenix is basically a magnetic sphincter. Okay, so it is said to be a magnetic sphincter. That means that in the anal canal, what you are required to do is that you are required. That means basically is that you place two magnets down here, and these magnets are electrically controlled magnets. That means that both of these magnets are controlled by one switch, which is in the hand of the patient. Now, if the patient wants to go to stool, only thing that he has to do is that have the off button. The magnets do not work and stool comes down. So this is all about knowing about what is to be done. Now, there are other options, believe me, that includes a sphincter repair, which we are going to talk very soon, but that is not at all a very good option. You can use something that we will be talking quickly, something called as a sacral nerve stimulation. You are also going to require something that we will add in this chapter, something called as the biofeedback. But remember, this is all things that are added. When everything fails, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, there is only one road to do a good colostomy. At least the quality of the life of the patient is good. Whereas, remember that if the sphincter is damaged and is less than 120, if the sphincter is damaged but is less than 180 degrees, sorry, not 120, sorry, 180 degree, you are required to do something called as a sphincteroplasty. Now, the sphincteroplasty is, always remember that whenever we think about a sphincteroplasty, the sphincteroplasty is usually an overlap, and this overlap doesn't mean that we are going to suture the two ends of the cut sphincter like this. If this is this one, let me take, this is not a very good technique. So, because when the muscle does contract, this is going to have a cut through. So what is done is that after an adequate mobilization of the sphincter muscle, the only thing that you can do is that you can keep the two sphincter muscles one above another, and then what we can definitely do is that we can go in for a few interrupted sutures. Okay, so this is how we go for a sphincteroplasty. Now remember that after a sphincteroplasty, on the other side of the story is two. Now when there is no sphincter defect, then what are we going to do? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last topic. This really doesn't have a strong answer. Two options to three options. First one is called as a sacral nerve stimulation, okay, which has come up a big way in the last one. Number two is something called as a biofeedback. Now, what is the sacral nerve stimulation story? Now, when you talk about the sacral nerve stimulation story, what is the sacral nerve stimulation story to remember? Just give me a second. Yeah. So what is a sacral nerve stimulation? Now, see, sacral nerve stimulation has come up a big way in the last couple of years. And what people have done or people have proposed is that no one exactly knows how a sacral nerve stimulation helps. So know about what is this procedure is that. Number one is that this is said to be a minimally invasive procedure for management of a fecal incontinence. So this is a minimally invasive procedure for treating an fecal incontinence. Now, so initially it was devised for an urinary problem, but probably they thought about that, yes, we can do that for fecal also. So what is done is that if you know about the sacrum, S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, now not S3 technically, what is done is that the patient has one electrode that is implanted, and this percutaneous electrode that is placed are placed around so that the nerves around the sacral 3 are going to get stimulated. Now, if you remember about little bit of anatomy for your purpose, the sacral 3 innervation is a very difficult one for everyone to understand. Now, what is important is that it is both a autonomic as well as a somatic. So there is a sacral 3 is both autonomic in that. Okay. Now, that means that what is important is now understand if it is thus now involved, what happens is there are two effects. Okay. One is that people say that one is that there is an increase in the resting tone. Now, how does it really do? No one exactly understands, but people have understood that there is an increase in the resting tone. Okay. Now, the second one of this is that when you talk over is that there is a contraction of the foot, or technically the great toe. The reason for knowing about the great toe is that though this should not be, because the S2, the S3 and the S4 more or the less are concentrated around the genitalia, but S1, as you see, goes to the great toe. So whenever you talk about the S1 which is at the great toe, so remember that, so there is a parallel contraction of the finger as well. So this is all about things that you are required to know. Okay. So remember that L5, S1, S2 has a little bit of something to do around with the great toe. S2, S3 is in the genitalia. Now, how does this sacral nerve thing really work is something that we do not know yet. So we have no idea that how does this thing work, and but what people have known is that this thing is an interesting one, is that after the sacral nerve stimulation has been done over the next 5 to 10 years, what happens is that patients have more than 50% improvement, and how does it really work is something that no one exactly knows. There are multiple proposals that has been given, but till to this date there has been no particular effect that has been recorded, but this one is said to be a good one. The last one is something called as a biofeedback, and the biofeedback are not only exercises. Exercises can be something called as a Kegel exercise, that is done for the perineal descent, etc. It can be a psychological counseling. Okay. Now, so this, remember, that is a very complex procedure to do, is something called as a biofeedback that is done. So ladies and gentlemen, this is all about what we know about how to treat a fecal incontinence. As I have said, the first part is taking a history. Then after you have done the history and the identification, treat it with medical therapy. If it fails, then let us take the patient to a lab, endorectal ultrasound, and this, right? along with prolapse and no prolapse. So now there used to be, remember, particularly in the chapter on rectal prolapse, something called as difficography. Now difficography, the conventional difficography had been in which the patient sat on a commode and the patient had a barium enema that was given as a form. So that means what the patient was done was that he or she was given a barium enema, and that barium enema used to be given till the sigmoid colon. Now the patient was told that now you pass the stool as you would do in a commode. Now, as you observe the barium descend out, there could have been pathologies like a rectocele. There could have been pathologies like a recto-rectal intersusception, or there could have been only a mucosal prolapse. So this was really very, again, an interesting identity. So is very, this done in a few places, was a good idea to get an idea that what is the dynamic thing. Now when MRI came into the story, what MRI tried to do is that MRI difficography, MRI tried to take a account of the muscle, again the same rectum, and the basic idea was that whenever it was filled up by some fecal material, now when this fecal material was trying to come out, MRI tried to resolve what is the status of this puborectalis muscle, because as you know on an MRI, if this is the symphysis pubis, the puborectalis forms a sling and this is the rectum. So it was basically trying to show you what is the status of contraction of the puborectalis. The only problem of an MRI is only one. In a conventional one, the patient has a squatting position, which is exactly the position that human beings will take for passing stools. An MRI difficogram, the basic problem is only one. The patient is supine, and then you tell the patient to pass stools. So this becomes a very tricky thing for the patient to do. So with this, I think, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the talk. So please ask me any questions till now. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go on.
Sir, when we do splenectomy for fissure in ano, sir, we'll generally do in the lateral side, no, sir?
Yes, obviously, because as I've said, if you do it in the posterior midline along with the fissure is in the posterior midline, the vascularity is least in the posterior midline, your chances of healing in posterior midline is the least. And hence it is good to do in the not in the posterior midline, but laterally.
Then how come the fibrosis will be, when we do it laterally, the fibrosis, the keyhole defect should be laterally, sir? You told it will be in the posterior midline.
That is right. Now see, because see the now our generation learned fissure in ano operation by doing from teachers who in their 1970s, 80s, etc. They were taught that if you have a fissure in ano, the fissure is going to expose you the muscles, isn't it? So they were taught that why do you need to cut another site? Just cut in this site. But if you do, that means at this position, you will get a posterior keyhole defect like this. This is a fibrosis. But if you do it in this position, well, you are not going to get a keyhole in the posterior midline. Your keyhole is going to look like this if you do it completely. But the main thing that exacerbates the keyhole is that in posterior midline, the vascularity is very poor. And hence that wounds do not heal and fibrosis happens. That makes the keyhole very prominent. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Sir, you told about high pressure zone, no, sir. What is meant by high pressure zone in the rectum? I mean,
see, like esophagus, now that is not number one, is that not a very, very well defined entity. Like in esophagus, you have a very strong definition, you have variants of high pressure zone. Now, the basic idea in an high pressure zone is that around the sphincter, that means around the terminal part of the anal canal. Remember that along the terminal part of the anal canal. Okay, so this terminal part of the anal canal tries to maintain a pressure zone that is very, very high. And this pressure zone that is high is mostly contributed by the external sphincter. Now, when someone has to pass stools, the puborectalis relaxes. The minute the puborectalis relaxes, external contraction or sphincter contraction is gone. The high pressure zone now technically becomes very minimal, and the stool can come now from the above downwards. Okay, right. Please. Hello. Any more queries and questions, please?
Sir, that inhibitory reflex, how it is?
Rectoanal inhibitory.
Yes, sir.
Yes, the rectoanal inhibitory reflex. Yes.
Yes, sir. Actually, internal sphincter is getting relaxed now, sir. So how is internal sphincter is helping to control the motion, sir? And
no,
80% of the tone is maintained by it.
Right. Absolutely right, sir. See, the basic idea is that this is a sampling reflex. This is a transient sampling. Understand the logic. The sampling reflex is that now this sampling reflex is only to test whether what is the thing that is coming from above. Just understand. If there is liquid that is coming from above, the tone needs to be decreased so that the liquid will reach the anal canal. So please remember that the liquid needs to reach the anal canal in this. So this is just a transient one. Now, if someone has a diarrhea or laxative abuse with say liquid paraffin, it is at this phase that the internal sphincter relaxation is so prolonged that the external sphincter as such, which is only 20% of the tone, cannot hold all. And thus at this point, if the chronic diarrhea or a mucin secreting tumor, the patient does have an incontinence. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Hello. Thank you. Okay, so I think that we do not have any more queries. Thank you very much. Okay.